All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Maya. I am a grad student at UCSB, and I graduated from UNT in 2017 with my bachelor's in science and psychology. So I have bring that perspective here, and I'm currently in an applied psychology program. So the goal is to have us trained to be faculty. In my emphasis is school psychology, and within that we do research and clinical work. And so really what I want for this time is to help answer any questions that you may have about that experience, help you feel a little bit more prepared if that's what you're looking for. If you're trying to decide if this is right for you, then we can do that. Oops. But I would love to hear from some of you if you're comfortable. If you could let me know just your name, your year, your major, and what it is that you're hoping to get out of this session.
Hi, I'm Kylie, and I am a freshman who's also a psychology major. I am hoping to get a bachelor's of science in psychology also. And so I was hoping to see more of what grad school's like, what some of the requirements are, all of that.
All right, great. Nice to meet you, Kylie. Michaela, you want to go next? I see you next on my screen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to get my
No worries.
phones to work. Well, my name is Michaela. I just graduated with my bachelor's degree last year, and I'm registered to become a biomedical engineer for the fall.
Wonderful. All right.
I'm hoping to get more information about grad school, so I'm more prepared for the fall.
Awesome. All right. Abigail, I see you next if you're ready.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. My name's Abigail, and I am also a psychology major, and I am looking to get my Bachelor in Science as well. I am currently a junior, and I'm just kind of exploring the options. I was thinking about going into maybe the clinical program at UNT, but I just wanted to learn more about grad school here.
Right, great. And Tejas, did I say your name right? What about Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a senior in high school right now, and I'll be attending UNT in the fall for a BA in psychology. So I just wanted to see like what grad school is like and just possibly like what my future will look like, just for fun.
Awesome, getting started nice and early. All right, Valerie?
Hey guys, I'm Valerie. I am actually in the staff in the UNT Honors, and so I just wanted to join the webinar and listen and see what you guys had to offer.
Great, thank you. Sherry or Sherry?
Hey, it's Cherie.
Sherry.
I am an advisor with the Honors College, and I am considering going to grad school at this point. So I just kind of wanted to see what you had to say and also just be an audience in the seminar.
Great, thank you. Krista? She might be busy. All right, we'll go ahead and jump in. So I'm gonna just kind of give you an overview of what my week kind of looks like and where my time is spent and some challenges and ways that I've overcome some of those throughout this process. But if you have any questions, please feel free to either send it into the chat, or I'll pause and see if there's anything that comes up. And then of course we'll have some time at the end as well. Okay, I'll share my screen with you here. All right, so within my program, we wear a few different hats. And so you're still a student, and I'll go through what that looks like. You're a researcher, you'll be a TA, and you're a clinician. And so we'll go over those in a little bit more detail. But broadly speaking, those are the main roles that you have while in a applied psych program. As a student, it's roughly 15 hours a week between the time that you spend in classes and doing your work for those classes. That does go down as you progress through your year. So in our program, the way that it's structured, you take the most classes your first year, and then your last year before you go on internship, most people don't have any classes unless they're taking a supplemental class for their dissertation project, or if maybe they weren't able to take one that didn't work with their schedule earlier on. But generally your first like 3-ish years are about 15 hours a week in classes. The classes are a little bit different from your undergrad classes. There's way less people in them. There's about anywhere from 4 to 20. So it's much more seminar-like. If any of you haven't taken a seminar class, if you get the opportunity to, it would be a great option. I know that the honors classes are structured a lot more like that typically. And sometimes within your major, you'll get a few options like that. Oh, thank you, Krista, no problem. So that will look a little bit different for you, and it is a little bit of an adjustment. You also typically have less homework in them. It's more about bigger projects that are there to prepare you professionally rather than, you know, busy work or that kind of thing. And the relationship that you have with your instructor is a little bit different. They're trying to prepare you to be a colleague, and whereas right now they're trying to prepare you to either further your education if that's what you're wanting to do, or just get this material. But in grad school, that dynamic is a little bit different. And the way that you're going through those classes is different too. Like you're very responsible for what it is that you learn. You're an active participant in your learning and setting your goals. And what that looks like for you can vary based on what it is that you're hoping to get out of the class. You'll have a lot of reading to do typically, but it's not you read and then you take a quiz or you take a written test. I actually have not had really any written tests this whole time in grad school. That does look different for some people in different programs, but typically it's more projects that are hopefully going to help you either submit something to a conference, or that might be helpful to start a manuscript, or it might be helpful for a dissertation project or something with your research lab. But you know, we don't have like the typical test, quiz, midterm type of structure that way. You are required to have a GPA that's a little bit higher. So passing is a B, not a C. So that can be a little bit different for some, but if you've made it into honors, then you've already hold yourself to that standard. So you're pretty well prepared for that. And you'll follow a course plan that your school provides for you, and that will look a little different across different programs. My program is pretty course heavy because it is a combined program. So they have to satisfy requirements for APA and NASP, the National Association of School Psychologists. So that can look a little different, but you can find that information on most grad school program websites, and you can get a sense of what kind of courses you'll be taking. And then your comps or your qualifying exams are what you take to advance to doctoral candidacy. So that's after you've completed the majority of your coursework, and you've completed at least a year of field work, and then you'll go in with a committee that you and your advisor select, typically about 3 people. And that part looks a little different for different programs as well, but it will include a written portion and an oral portion. So written, you'll have papers. For mine, we wrote an ethics paper, a theoretical orientation paper, and a research paper, and then you submit that to your committee. You go in for the oral exam, 2 hours roughly, and they'll ask you questions about that, and they're very applied questions, and really they're trying to test your knowledge to see if you're qualified to move on to that next phase of your education. So if you have any questions about what that part looks like, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that. I'll pause for a second.
Hi, Maya, I have one question again. So
Yeah.
you mentioned 1 year of field work. So what exactly would that look like in grad school?
I will get to that in just a moment. Okay, so especially within a PhD program, your research focus is pretty heavy. If you go into a PsyD program, it's going to be more focused on practice. If you go into a different field, that might look a little bit different, but PhD programs are very research focused. So the hours do vary and change. They increase, the amount of time you spend on research will increase as you go through your program. So you're going to spend less time on research your first year than you will your fourth and fifth year, for example. And I would say in general, that's where at least half of your time is spent, if not more, on that. It does typically provide you with funding opportunities, though, in PhD programs. You're not going to get as much of that in, say, a master's program. But through grants that your research team or that your school is applying for to support that research, a lot of times that's how you'll get funding. So in our program, they'll call you, it'll give you a GSR title, so graduate student researcher. And the amount that you get paid will change as well as you advance through the program. So that typically covers a portion of your tuition and fees and a monthly stipend. So it's really helpful for that part as well. So that's where a big portion of your funding comes from. And then you are expected to go to conferences. They'll evaluate you if you've been attending those, presenting, and including that. And most places will provide some level of financial support for that too. Unfortunately, not quite as much as you get if you're one of the McNair Scholars. They're very generous about how they've helped out with that. But they do provide some support there, and that is a big part of advancing through the programs. And then your projects that you have will vary based on your area of emphasis and that you're trying to explore. And sometimes what happens is you may come in with an idea, and your advisor might want you to focus first on something they already have going to help build up your research skills. And then as you progress, they'll give you more independence on how you spend your time doing those research projects and applying for grants and getting undergrad research teams together. If you haven't participated on a research team yet, I'd highly recommend that you get going with that if you're considering going into a PhD program. That will make you a lot more competitive, and if you do get in, a lot more prepared, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable that way. And different programs will have different ways of having you present or display your projects. For us, start of our third year, we have a research festival where you go in and you present on the project that you submit for your qualifying exams that you completed in your second year, and you present that to the entire department, and that's part of one of your major milestones. So they'll provide a lot of opportunities too for you to practice discussing your research findings and going through that. And then your dissertation proposal and defense. So what that will look like is you'll have another committee. Sometimes it's the same people that were on your qualifying exam committee. Sometimes it's different. And again, you and your advisor will work together to select that committee, develop good research questions and topics and methodology. You'll go in, you'll present a proposal to them. And that takes about 2 hours. Again, if you're sure, especially if we get done here and you're like, yes, this sounds great for me, UNT does offer that Bachelor's of Science in psychology. And if you're wanting to do this, that's what I did, and it really helped prepare me for this, because you'll have to do that honors thesis, which is like the undergrad equivalent of going through that proposal and defense process. So a lot of people, if you don't go into a master's program first, especially, then you may not get this experience before you do that for the first time, and that can be extremely stressful and nerve-wracking, even having had that process in the past. So any chance you get to practice writing up research, practice presenting it and posing your ideas and defending your results, that will prepare you a lot better. Okay, I'll pause here again if anyone has questions about that, if you want to unmute yourself or stick it in the chat. All right. As a teaching assistant, you get some more funding this way, typically. So I'm sure most of you have worked with some teaching assistants in your courses, and then that will vary as well, but typically it's about 10 hours a week. You'll usually get one class that you're the TA for. And it depends, again, on what that course looks like, what that particular professor expects of you. But it's typically about 10 hours for a class. So it's hard to kind of do more than one class at a time. You can, depending on your schedule and what the course requirements are for that. And that can vary too. So typically you'll start by maybe giving some section lectures where they're a little bit smaller groups of students. Grading may help with some lesson planning, depending on what that dynamic is between you and the teaching professor. And then after you've completed whatever your program requires you to complete, for us, it's a course in pedagogy and 3 quarters of being a teaching assistant. And then you can be what they call a teaching associate, where you're the primary instructor for that course. And so then again, that gives you even more funding opportunities there, more teaching opportunities. And the PhD program is designed to help prepare you for academia. So they really want to make sure that you get that opportunity to practice and develop your teaching skills. I'll pause again. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, so the clinician practitioner role here, so this is what the fieldwork is referring to. So here it's roughly 15 hours a week, and that'll kind of change more or less as you go in different programs. For me, my main placement is in the school, since I'm in the school psych emphasis. If you are in counseling or clinical, it might be in a hospital, it might be in the university counseling center, it might be in a community mental health clinic. So those are good questions to ask when you go into interview, is to ask what kind of fieldwork sites they have relationships with and what those look like. There you typically have your supervisor group at the school. And so for us, all of us school psychs come together every week in a course that's 3 hours, and we discuss our cases, and then we get information related to mental health interventions, ethical practice, consultation models. And so we have 2 years of that where we go and we do that at the school. And then we also have our on-site supervisor. So that person is not working with the university. They are either the primary school psychologist or maybe the director of clinical training there at the clinic that you're working at. And they also provide you supervision. So everything that you do, you have somebody to go to and to help support you through your training there. PCIT, that's called Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. We have that at our clinic. And there we do live coaching of parents and their children ages 2 to 7 with behavioral problems. And so that one, it works a little bit different because it's a supervisor that I have that's part of that clinic, but she is also a university professor as well. And she is in charge of that clinic. So it really depends on the specific school that you go to and what those opportunities are going to look like. And then externships are also there, so that's kind of worked in. Like I said, my primary placements are in the school, but if you go into a different emphasis within psych, then you'll have different opportunities there. Some places will provide funding, but not all. So those are good questions to ask when you're looking at your placements that you're looking for. Last year I did not get paid for my school placement, but this year I got paid a stipend for it. Some clinics will be able to provide you funding, some hospitals will be able to provide you funding, but not all. So it's not something that you necessarily want to plan for or rely on, but it could provide some extra support there. All right, I'll pause here again, ask you if anyone has questions. Okay. All right, so some of the common challenges that myself and some of the members of my cohort, imposter syndrome. So if you haven't felt that already, if you decide to go into grad school, you most likely will. And I think the biggest thing I can say about that is that it's normal. Everyone feels that way. And hundreds of people are applying to these programs, and it's a very competitive process. And the people that are selecting the students to come in are some of the most highly esteemed experts in their field. So if they've chosen you to be one of their students, then you're good. You're prepared, you're qualified. They have the confidence in you to succeed. They want you to succeed. So while it's common and it's normal, it's also something that is it's a challenge, yes, but it's something that everyone is facing and everyone is able to overcome as well. So yes, it can be uncomfortable, but if you got in, you do belong there. And I think that's important to remind yourself, is that it just like with being a part of the honors college, maybe sometimes you may feel like, oh, I don't know, like these other students in my class are really, really smart. Yes, they are, but so are you. And that's what got you there. And same thing with grad school. It's normal to feel that way. It's normal to feel out of place, but it's okay, and you'll make it through. Time management can be very challenging for a lot of people. You wear a lot of different hats, as I just mentioned, so that can be difficult. And with all of those different hats, most of them are new for many people, so that can make it really challenging because it's not something that you're used to doing. I wore a lot of hats in undergrad, but some of those things I was comfortable with, I was used to doing, so I didn't have a learning curve for every single role. In grad school, there's a learning curve for every single role because you haven't been experienced in those areas before, at least not if you go in right from undergrad as I did. Had never worked in a school before, so that was new. I had never taught a class before, so that was new. Some of the research was helpful in that I had experienced that being on a research team, but I hadn't been responsible for leading my own project. I had done different type of research, so everything is very new, which means it takes you a lot longer to do than you may be used to spending your time on. And you are having to balance a lot of different things, and so getting that time management under there can be really challenging sometimes. And if you're not used to juggling a lot of different roles, or if you're not used to making your own schedule, that's a big part of it. They'll tell you the requirements that you have to make, but really it's up to you how you get there. So you're very independent in that regard, and so being able to make that happen can be challenging for some. Oops. And then organization within that time management. So with wearing a lot of different hats means that you have a lot of different responsibilities that you need to keep track of. So sometimes that can be hard for you because you don't just leave the job and then you're done. A lot of times you could go to your fieldwork and do counseling sessions or do assessments, but then you have to come home and write reports and work on that if you weren't able to finish it there. And then you still have classes that you're needing to take care of, and then you still have maybe a manuscript that you're writing with your program. So there's just a lot of moving pieces, and so making sure that you have good organization skills is going to be really helpful for you there. Self-advocacy, and this will vary for different programs on what this might look like. There's a lot of opportunities in grad school, which is fantastic, but that can also be really hard to find a good, which kind of goes into the next one, of finding a balance between things. So it is your degree, and you should feel like you can make it what you want to make it. But then within that comes with, you have to be able to tell your advisor, tell your program coordinators what it is that you need from them. And that can be hard if you haven't been in a position like that before, and there are some power dynamics there, and depending on the relationship you have with your primary advisor, that could make it more or less difficult. So that can be hard for some people, and that can be a challenge that they face. And then finding balance within your schoolwork, but also within your personal life. It can be really difficult to balance all of those different hats I just mentioned that you wear, and then also you're still a person. So that can be pretty difficult for a lot of people to balance all of this here. So I'd say those are some of the most common challenges, but of course, different people will find that different things are hard for them throughout this process. And then I won't pause here. I'll go into kind of how I've coped with some of these things or how others have, and then we can talk about this in a little bit more detail if you'd like. So ways that I've learned to cope with those challenges, learning how to say no, for starters. That can be a really, really hard one for a lot of people. I hear it every year, even as people are exiting their graduate program, that can be really hard. A lot of people get into grad programs because they're very they're driven, they're go-getters, and they really want to accomplish a lot, which is great, but sometimes that can mean that you might have a challenge sometimes saying, you know, I got too much on my plate, I can't do all of this. And that can be really hard because you're wanting to do well, and you're wanting to make sure that you get all of your milestones met and that you get all your training in. It may seem like a long time if you're going to spend 5 to 7 years in a program, but it goes by super fast. And so sometimes when a new opportunity comes up, you get really excited and you want to do that while you're there. Or somebody might ask you to take on a new project or to take on a different role within a project, and you want to say yes, you want to pick up all the skills that you can while you're here. But that can be really difficult for you. Hi, Krista. Thanks for coming. And then remembering your worth is really helpful too. Grad school can be really challenging. And like I said, there's big learning curves, which means you don't get a lot of opportunities to feel like you're truly excelling. You might get some little things here and there where you're like, oh, I did that great, and that's awesome. But a lot of times it's very difficult. And so it's hard sometimes because you as a student have been a really good student, and that might be how it's been for you for a while, or it might have been how you were the last 4 years of college. But then you get in and you're trying to learn a bunch of new things, and sometimes it's not always going well, and that can be really difficult. So your work and your progress in there is not the only thing that defines you. So just remembering that and falling back on that. And then identifying when and where you're most efficient. So for some people, it's working from home. For me, it's not working from home. I get too distracted, want to take care of other things. So it's been a little bit challenging right now, given the lockdown sometimes. But some people work great at home. Some people work better at their school office, at their library, at maybe a local coffee shop. I work better in the morning than I do at night. So just really taking the time to get to know yourself and when and where you're most efficient, because there's a lot of moving pieces that you're having to navigate, and it doesn't make sense for you to get up at 4 in the morning and work if you're a night owl, or it doesn't make sense for you to stay up until 2 in the morning if you're a morning person. So figuring out how to work your best and work the smartest that you can. Take care of your body. You're not going to function very well if you're not sleeping or eating well or exercising the way that you need to. That can be hard sometimes. It sometimes feels like everyone is doing more than you, but when you really take the time to talk to people, everyone's in the same boat that you are. It just looks a little bit different, and there's times where you're handling things a little bit better, and times where your cohort members are handling things a little bit better. And that's just part of life and the ebb and flow of things. And so if you feel like, I just can't do this right now, I need to go take a walk, or I need to go for a hike or go swimming, whatever it is that you do to help your body stay healthy, it's worth it. It's worth the time to do that. And retaining the other parts of your identity. So yes, you're a grad student, but you're also the other parts that make you you. And for me, that's horseback riding. I'm a partner, I have a dog. So even though I'm a grad student, I'm still these other things too. And that's important to remember, because it's not your entire being that's there, and that's important. So it's really important to keep a hold of those other things. And that's part of taking care of yourself too. Building your support group. So that might come from people in your program. It might come from other people at the school. For me, I have a wonderful cohort. I'm very grateful for them. They've been a huge source of support for me. My partner's been a huge source of support for me. my staple community here at the Book Barn. They've been great. My family has been great. So making sure that you have people that you can rely on and lean on as you go through the process. Planning your trips home if you decide to go out of state. So I came over to California, and one of the things that's been really helpful for me is knowing when I get to go back home and visit my family. So if I didn't have that trip planned, it was kind of hard for me because I'm like, well, is it going to be 3 months? Is it going to be 6 months? Like, when do I get to go home? So even if I plan it really far in advance, it's just nice to know when it's coming. So that was something that was helpful for me and some of my other peers that came from out of state. And going to counseling yourself. It's a hard process. There's a lot of challenges. It can be very difficult. So making sure that you're getting the mental health support that you need to take care of yourself. And especially if you're going to be counseling others, then you should really understand what it's like to be on the other side of that table there, and get a sense of what it feels like to be on the other side of that role if you are going to be providing those services to another person. And there's a book I highly recommend. It's not a very long read, but I read it and it did help me a lot. I really struggled with this in undergrad and growing up, and I've done a lot better with it now. And I recommend it to all the people in my program, anyone I talk to about grad school. It's not, like I said, it's not a very long book. It's a good read, and it just gives you some helpful practical strategies of how to help yourself find that balance and learn. It's a form of self-respect to be able to say no to things that you're either cannot handle at this moment or that you really don't want to do or don't want to spend your time doing. It gives you some helpful strategies of how to do that in a professional way. All right, so I'm happy to discuss any of these elements that you would like to know more about. I just kind of wanted to give you a broad overview of what that is like for me, and whatever it is that you want to discuss more about, I would love to hear from you, what your concerns are, or any questions that you have about anything that we talked about. So.
Hi, Maya. It's Kylie.
Hi.
I do have a question. So I've heard that taking the psychology subject test for the GRE, that's required for some schools. Would you recommend doing that?
If it's not required, then no. I didn't have to do it for any of the schools that I applied to, and some schools are starting to not require the GRE at all. If you majored in psychology and you did well in your psychology classes, then it's really no value added.
Okay.
The only reason that it would really make sense to do it would be if you didn't major in psychology, or if you maybe switched majors later, or if you didn't do very well in your psych classes, or if the program requires it. But if you majored in psych, you did well in your major classes, and the program doesn't require it, it's not going to add any value to your application.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the GRE in general too, yes, you need to take it for a lot of programs, and yes, you want to do well, but it's not going to be your make or break it. Really what it's for is for them to get a kind of a glimpse of that you understand basic math and reading and writing skills, and that you can do that. And what I've heard from other professors is really it's, they want to make sure that you can be successful in a stats class, for example. So if you haven't taken stats classes, and they just want to make sure that you are at like a functional level. I did not like ace my GREs by any means, and still got my top choice school. So it's just a part of your application. It's not the biggest part of your application. It's just a kind of a checkbox that has to be made to show that you are competent enough in those areas, but it's not, you don't have to be at like the 99th percentile to get in.
Okay, alrighty, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What else? What other thoughts do you guys have? Or if there's an area that you want to know more about, kind of glimpsed over most of those things. But if there's something you want to learn more about what that experience is like, go ahead and let me know. how do you feel about it? You could give me in the comments, or you can turn it on. So the weekly schedule, so that's kind of like so I don't have a class every day. I never have. I actually would say that it's like maybe 2 or 3 days a week you might have a class. And that might change a little bit based on different programs, but the classes are typically 1 3-hour block. You don't go to a class multiple times. So you don't have like Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes like you do right now. So that's a little bit different. And then the field work you typically go to once or twice a week, depending on your placement. So you don't do anything really every day except for your own personal homework and research and writing projects, that kind of thing. But as far as going somewhere, you don't typically go to any placement multiple times or every day. It's typically once or twice a week. So if you are TAing for a class, then you'll go to that class or that section up to 3 days a week, depending on the structure of the course. And then your fieldwork placements are typically around 2 days a week, based on what it is that they're expecting from you. If some people work at juvenile hall, so they go 1 day for 12 hours, but then obviously a school is not going to work that way. So then we go 2 days a week. So it's really up to that fieldwork placement, what that's going to look like. And then your research is typically, you'll have a research team meeting once a week, but then the other research pieces will be coordinated within your team or your lab and what that's going to look like. So does that help with the weekly schedule?
Thank you.
Okay. So what do you think? Does it seem like grad school is a good fit for you? You feel a little unsure about something still? How's everyone feeling on it? Yeah, I highly recommend that book. It was super helpful. I finished it pretty fast, and one of the biggest things that I've been able to implement with myself is just I'll get back to you by the end of the week. Even that simple little phrase of doing that, or I'll get back to you by the end of the day, whatever, depending on the urgency of the situation. But you are not obligated to be glued to your email and respond to something the minute that it comes in. You can take your time and think about if that's the right thing for you to do or not. And there's other little helpful strategies within there too, and in ways that you can come up with saying that. But for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways, is that I can take that time and think and reflect and see if this is something that I want to take on or not. And that's a good thing to consider too when you're doing your applications and your interviews, getting a sense for what that dynamic looks like between the advisor you're applying for and the other students in their research team. If that seems like that's something that's there and that's an option, mine is very respectful of that. He'll provide us opportunities, but he's very clear of saying, this does not mean that you have to do this. I'm just letting you know that this option is there. And so that's been helpful for me to be able to practice this skill, whereas some advisors are not going to be quite like that. They'll have a different dynamic in their lab. So it's a good thing to consider as you go through, because it's a lot that's on your plate. So you want to make sure that you have the support you need to be successful, so that you're not spreading yourself too thin across everything. So what do you think? For those of you who are considering if you were wanting to apply, do you feel like this has given you a good sense of what that looks like? Do you have questions about what any of those pieces or those roles? You want more clarity on any of that? Okay, what about in the chat? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that little reaction thing if you wanted to use that. If you feel like you have what you need, or if you feel you have another question, we still have some time. We can go through that. All right, Kylie's feeling pretty good. Who else? What would be more helpful for you? Abigail's doing pretty well. All right. Glad to hear it. Kayla's good. Awesome. How about Hannah and Cherie? Yeah, good. All right. So I will say that a lot of these, everyone's program is going to feel a little different and look a little different. Some of the best advice I think that was given to me was that when you're interviewing, look to see if the other grad students are happy. If they're not happy when you go to meet them, then it's probably not the place that you want to spend your time. You know, every program has its strengths and weaknesses, but it's not an easy thing to do, and you want to be with people who are supporting you and want you to be doing your best. And that can look different for different people, so it's really going to be what is the best fit for you. And if you make it to the interview process, then they've already determined that you're qualified enough. So at that point, when you get to the interview process, it's not so much about what you have done or haven't done. They already know that based on your documents that you've submitted. It's about the goodness of fit. So using that time to figure out, you know, what does their weekly schedule look like? Does it look similar to what I discussed here? Do they spend more time in classes or more time on field work or research or teaching? Do they, not all places offer the same amount of teaching experience as others. And my program guarantees that you'll get at least one chance to do it. Not all places will do that. Some places will have a higher requirement for it. So figuring out what goals you have for your graduate school experience, and then does that program align with those goals? And does the person you're applying to work with match your personality and what it is that you need? Different advisors are going to have different styles. Some are going to be very hands-on. Some are going to say, this is the grant that we have, these are the research projects that we have, and this is what I'll expect you to work on. Some will say, these are the projects I have going, and if you're interested in it, great, but if you're interested in doing a different project that's still within my area of expertise, I'm happy to support you on that. Some will say you have to come up with your own project independently and fill out your own grant applications and do that. So there's a big spectrum of different styles of advising. And so you taking the time to figure out what it is that you need and what you're looking for is going to be really important to help you get the most out of your experience there. So I'd say that's, and then aligning with your goals. So you can look at some of the data that the places have on their website to see where they are getting internships at, where they're getting jobs after they graduate, and see if that's what it is that you're looking for. And that will help you to make some decisions on if that program feels like it's a good fit for you. And then is there any questions about that process, the interview process or the application process? No? Okay. Well, unless anyone else has any questions, that's all that I have for y'all today. And Miranda has my email address. If you think of anything else, please feel free to let me know. Or if you get in through the process and you have some other questions, if you're in that application process, you know, some of you said you were in your earlier on or in your junior year, if you decide that you want to apply and you have some questions about that, or if you get into the program and you want to kind of get a little bit more of what to expect, please feel free to reach out. She has my contact info and I'm happy to share it with you guys.
Thank you so much, Maya, for taking the time to chat with us. And I will put this on YouTube and I'll send you the link so you can share it with whoever you'd like as well.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk with you guys. Hope it was helpful. And like I said, please feel free to reach out if anything else comes up later as you get through your program. You want to know more or help get prepared for something, I'm happy to help out in any way I can.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.